The first strategy that you need to focus on for growing your podcast is creating strong titles that compel people to want to watch your show or listen to your show. I find that in the podcast space, a lot of titles are very generic and boring and do not elicit any sort of feeling of, oh, I should definitely go and check that out. And that is what is causing a lot of you to not grow because your titles are boring. The caveat to this is people will say, well, look at some of these shows. They just have the episode number and, the guest name. We'll take Joe Rogan as an example. And the hard truth is that many of you are not Joe Rogan. You are not having celebrities on and using that as the core name in the title. And you also haven't been at this since the beginning. A lot of podcasts that were very, very early can do titles like that because their subscribers and people who have been following their show have been around for a long time before there was any sort of competition to win your attention over. And I often say to people that if I don't know you, and maybe I don't even know your guest, and your episode title is just the episode number and that guest name, why on earth, if I even came across it, would I want to consume this? There's nothing in it for me from a 30,000 foot view. And that is the biggest issue that I am always seeing is that your titles are boring. So the question becomes, well, how do you fix this? And what's true about titles, and this has really transformed the way that I think about it, and a lot of experts in the space will agree on this, is that you need to determine what your goal is with your titles. There's sort of three main drivers and emotions that are causing people to click on most titles, causing you to watch the videos that you watch, and causing me to watch the podcast episodes that I watch. And it's either fear, curiosity, or desire, or a mix of those. And so the way to think about that is, am I trying to create a title that is going to speak to my core audience's desire? Am I creating a video that's going to spark curiosity for my ideal type of viewer? Or is it going to speak to a fear that they have? And so a few examples of this would be, say that you are in the personal finance space. If you're wanting to speak to your core audience's desire, you could have a title that instead of how to get rich, that's an okay way to speak to their desire, but it could be how to get rich in less than 6 months. Now, I don't know what's fully going on there, but what that does is it gives them a timeline to work within. And so I know going into that video, this is going to teach me how to get rich within the next 6 months. And that creates a desire because if you're in personal finance, your audience is looking for ways to want to build wealth. Now, say if your title was going to be fear-based. So a lot of people have a lot of fear around their money, right? And so one thing that you could speak to is one of those fears. And you could say, if people are interested in personal finance, they probably don't want to go broke, right? And so instead of just how to not go broke, which is it's fine title, it's better to say these 9 habits are keeping you poor. Immediately, do you want to watch the one that says how to not be broke, or the one that is identifying that there's 9 habits that are likely keeping you broke and you need to avoid them? That speaks to the fear that your audience would have. And for curiosity, you can lean into making them feel like you're about to tell them something that they don't yet know and they haven't even thought of. So they don't know that this is a desire of theirs. They don't know that this is a fear of theirs. And so an example of that would be the $1 million investing strategy that no one is talking about. Because that speaks to me as someone who's interested in personal finance, but it's speaking through a lens of driving more curiosity because I don't know what this is. Clearly, no one's talking about it except for you. Whereas instead, people would have maybe usually titled that episode, whatever the strategy is, but in a way that I'm not curious about it because now I see what it is, but I don't really know what it is because if no one's talking about it, then I'm not going to recognize it and I'm not going to watch it versus the $1 million investing strategy that no one is talking about. And so that as 3 examples there is the difference between okay titles or boring titles and creating different emotions for your potential viewer. The other thing with titles is looking at what is your competition doing? So let's get tactical on how to find actual new ideas for you. Now, granted, you can always come up with your own ideas and, lean into those emotions, and that's great. But if we want to take a step further of, well, how do I create something that has a greater chance off the bat of doing well? We go and search on YouTube to identify what is working well within our industry that you would already have a different take on. You can share your own perspective, your own advice, your own stories related to this topic that's different than other people within your niche, but it's around the same core theme because you have shared audiences. Your audiences are going to be going to you and them, depending on whether you're in the racing cars space, the video game space, the podcast space, or the personal finance space. Whatever it's going to be, you're not going to be the only creator in that space. So what we want to do is we want to model what's already working as a way for you to jumpstart the growth of your channel. And then eventually we'll get to where you are the top creator within your niche. So as an example, I would go onto YouTube and we'll stay with this niche, search personal finance. A tool that I want all of you to download because it will be really helpful is there is a Google extension for a tool called vidIQ. And vidIQ does a bunch of stuff, but there's a free part of their extension that what it does is shows me the amount of views that a video is getting every single hour. There's this little thing here next to a video's views that says, this says 22 VPH, and that stands for views per hour. Now, where this is interesting is what I actually want to do is look for videos that are getting a ton of views per hour, and the older those videos are, the more identifiable a outlier and pretty much evergreen topic is going to be within your niche. So really off the bat, if I was in personal finance, I search that, I come across this guy's channel. He's got 1.94 million subscribers, which is really incredible. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to his videos. I'm going to go to latest, and I would start searching through these videos here. And what I would be looking for are titles that are things that I could speak to that seem to be doing well on his channel. And so as an example, I'm looking through this and I immediately see, a lot of videos that are like, 100,000 views, 70,000 views. But then what I do see is this video here that has 1.1 million views, and his channel has 1.9 million. It's very rare for videos to always get more views than the subscribers that they have when you're at this scale. But what I can see is this video is an outlier because all the videos around it have hundreds of thousands of views, but this one has 1 million views. And at the time of this was recorded 2 months ago, and I can see it's getting 252 views every single hour right now, which means it's still doing well. And so it's the 10 jaw-dropping money stats of the average person. Now, what I would think about this is if I'm a money person, again, you apply this to all of your niches, the same would go for it, is I would say, well, let me watch this, see what the money stats are. Are there other money stats that weren't talked about here that I think are actually more interesting and more people need to know about? And I would make my own video that might be, the 5 jaw dropping, maybe it's the 15, it really is up to you there. But what was clear about this is people really love the idea of these money stats of the average person. It speaks to my curiosity. It speaks to the desire of somebody who wants to hopefully be better off financially than that. Or it can speak to the fear of someone to say like, oh shoot, am I below like the average when it comes to like money stats? And so it speaks to all of those emotions, which is why it did so well. So that would be something I'd say, can I have my own spin on this? Because this is proven to be doing really good. What I would then also do is keep looking, right? So off the bat, as they keep going down here, I would say, we're doing this in real time, right? So here's another one that is interesting. So this one was, 7 signs someone is secretly wealthy. And this video is 5 months old. It's still getting 45 views an hour. It's a pretty good outlier for his channel. Maybe you have a different take on the amount of signs that, someone is secretly wealthy, or you have a different perspective on that. And so I hope that's a tactical way for you to look at videos in your niche and understand, okay, these are ideas that are proven. I could definitely do a take on this. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And granted, you can always create new ideas. I want everybody to be original and follow their true curiosity. But what's mostly important is when you do that, you do think about, all right, what is the core feeling that I want someone to have? And if you can get clear on that strategy, it is going to help you so much. And having a better idea from the jump before you even record, that then allows you to make a episode worth consuming. So what is the second strategy that is going to help you grow your podcast? It's very related to the title conversation that we just had. What you could tell when you were looking at all those videos that I was showing you was the fact that they all had their titles and then they all had their thumbnails. These are the images that you see as you're scrolling through YouTube, and now they're also on the podcast platforms. They're on Spotify. You can upload them to Apple Podcasts. It is what people are going to see as they're starting to consume, the content, that's going to help them decide whether it's worth investing time into your video or to all the other videos around you. Now, the next biggest strategy when it comes to growing your podcast is actually your thumbnails. These are the images that people are going to see in front of your episode on YouTube as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to help them determine whether they want to consume this episode or keep scrolling on to the next thing. And in many cases, you see the thumbnails before you even see the titles. And the biggest opportunity that we have is, when you open up YouTube or Spotify, you're going to be served a bunch of different content that you can potentially choose from. And so the relationship between your thumbnail and your title is what is going to have to draw people in, because I'm immediately seeing maybe your content or maybe I'm seeing other people's content. Like if I just scroll down my homepage here, immediately you can see the different types of thumbnails, the different types of content. We have shorts in here, up here. I don't know if you saw, we have ads that are now flooded into, the homepage. I got YouTube games that are, on the homepage. I am being served so many different things. And so what you want is for your content to stand out amongst the rest of the content that people might be getting served. And you're wondering well, how can I tell what episodes I'm going to be next to? Chances are you're thinking about your ideal audience, right? And so if you think about other top creators in your space, it's likely who your ideal audience is currently already watching because they don't know about you yet. And so you need to make thumbnails that compete with them and eventually become better. The biggest issue is a lot of people will make thumbnails that if I put it up against the top person in their field, they would always have the worst idea. They would have the boring thumbnails. And so why would anyone choose to watch your video over someone else's? And I think a really helpful thing to understand is seeing sort of a before and after of a creator deciding to take their thumbnails really serious. One of my favorite examples to understand the difference in titles and thumbnails here is one of my clients, Sinead Bovell, who does incredible videos in the tech industry. And before we were working together on her new podcast, she had kind of just posted when she was on TV and a couple of, different videos here and there over the years that got still, a couple thousand views. And so people were paying attention, and she crushes on short form content other places. But when we decided to relaunch her podcast, we knew that we wanted to change the way that the titles were being done and the way that the thumbnails looked in a way that would hopefully invoke curiosity, desire, or fear, depending on the topic, for her audience, which is people who are wanting to understand how the workforce is going to change, understand how AI is going to affect their lives or their jobs. And so what we did is we stuck with a few core ideas for thumbnails. And so when I talked about earlier of them being clear, not clever, bold, simple to understand, this is what I'm talking about. So beforehand, these thumbnails here were, them on TV. There's the whole headline thing here that's hard to read. It's kind of small, especially here. It's very small, hard to read. And so what we knew we had to do is we had to make her face bigger on the thumbnail, as well as the guests of the interviews that she had on for her interview podcast. And then we needed text in the middle that was going to drive more curiosity. And so what we decided to do is the second episode, we had someone who was not on any podcast or relatively unknown. And we had this thumbnail where it was both of their faces, big and bold, with, there's emotions in their face to hopefully create some curiosity in those who see it. But then we have this, how AI will disrupt the workforce. And our core audience is people who are worried about, hey, how AI is coming for their jobs potentially. And so what we did is we made that the thumbnail, and we made the title. This is an economist focused in the AI space. And so, people could have titled this, again, going back to the first point of, how the economy is going to change with AI. And that's good, but does it speak to their fear or their desire? People are fearing that they're going to lose their jobs, and the desire they have is to stay employed and to keep their job. So we made this thumbnail speak to their fear of knowing AI is going to disrupt the workforce, and then we made the title focus around their desire of staying employed, which then creates the AI economist, the skill you need to stay engaged in the age of AI. Which then brings us to the AI economist, the skill you need to stay employed in the age of AI. We did the AI economist so that tells you that this is an authoritative person speaking to you. This is not someone who's ever been on a bunch of podcasts, so we weren't leaning into his name. He was relatively unknown, but this video still broke 100,000 views because of that. And then we move on to another great example. I love this show, and she's just done such an incredible job. And I just love to point out things that's like, hey, this is, we applied these lessons with people that I worked with just to show it, actually in motion. But her audience is fearful of AI taking their jobs. And so there was a news story about different companies laying people off. And so we decided to make a video that was a response to that and breaking down how to prepare, how to think about that, and what this all means. And she actually had an interesting take on it. And so we knew that people were seeing this thing about Amazon, laying off 14,000 people, or UPS, laying off 48,000 people. And so we used those headlines here because people had been seeing that. So that felt familiar to them and was clear and bold. And then we led with this copy here in the thumbnail, what nobody is telling you about your job. And that creates curiosity, creates a little bit of fear. And you're also now desiring to know, well, what nobody is telling me about, the future of my job, because I'm putting that with these, two headlines about layoffs. And then we put that with the title, which again, in a lot of cases, if you take like a news source, they probably would have titled it, they would have just titled it like, these companies are laying people off. That's not interesting. Instead, we took the take of AI can't do your job, so why are companies laying off employees? And this speaks to people that, are curious about why this is happening. They're fearful of this happening. They desire to know more about what's happening so they can prepare. And this video got over 100,000 views. And this was a channel that at the time had maybe 12,000 subscribers. So this became an outlier because we decided to not take the usual approach or just kind of an okay title, but instead what we did was look around the space. We knew that AI is a huge keyword for their industry. Looked at all the videos around job loss and the workforce, and there was a handful of, popular videos within there. And we decided to create her own take on it. And we tweaked the title a little bit to be, more unique and fully within her brand. But we looked at what was working, and then we used all of these elements to create thumbnails that were clear and created curiosity, desire, or fear, and that were related to the titles. So ideally, you would see this and you would say, what nobody's telling you about your job. And then you would see this where it says, AI can't do your job, so why are companies laying off employees? And through all this, I'm now very curious of, well, why is this happening? What is nobody telling me about, my job? I want to know. And boom, that video was an outlier for that channel. Now, before we get into the final strategy, one of the things I love to give people the homework to do and start to create the habit of is pay attention to the videos that you watch and the podcasts that you watch, especially from new creators, because I think you will start to identify, oh, their thumbnails were really interesting and grabbed my attention. Or, oh, their titles were really interesting too. And I felt like I was so curious to learn about this. Or it was speaking to a fear that I have around money or health or my industry, and I felt like I had to watch it. Or it spoke to this thing that I'm going after and I want to achieve, and this person achieved it, and so I want to understand, well, how do I do that too? If you start to pay attention to what you're watching, you'll better understand the psyche of your audience and why they're making decisions to watch you or someone else in your space. So it can be really as simple as that. And then the other thing, as you start to improve your titles and your thumbnails, is a final test for me that always helps me get better with everything that I do in every episode I make myself or someone that I'm giving, strategic feedback to, is put your video up to the top people in your space and tell me, would you click on yours over your competition? If the answer is no, what do you need to tweak there? Do you need to change the title a little bit? Do you need to shorten it? Do you need to change the thumbnail? Is the thumbnail not that interesting? Are the colors too boring? Is there too much going on? Like, what do you need to change to make it stronger and more compelling than the person that is one of the biggest creators in your space? And if you can make changes based on that and improve that 5%, 1% with every single video that you put out, do that over a year and you will suddenly be able to compete with them on a, very similar level. It's just that right now they understand the podcast game differently than you do, better than you do. But that's why you're here. That's why you're learning. But I love that sort of filter through looking at your videos compared to other people within your space. What I also love to point out is that this is the evolution that so many podcasts go through. And I love to look at channels that have gone through it, and you can see in real time typically when they made the switch, and you can see where they started to play this game better and get better results. And so to show you this, I think a channel that has done incredible over the last few years is Dan Martell's channel. This is somebody who has, millions of subscribers now. But 6 years ago, look at their thumbnails, right? It's kind of a lot going on. I could see that this guy's in the background, but I don't really see him. These are a lot of words for me to see. It's the same text on the thumbnail as it is in the title. So, these videos still now have gotten over 20,000 views over 6 years. So it's like, oh, some stuff to learn there. But overall, it's like, if I put this up against most videos on my homepage, I probably wouldn't watch them. However, you can see when they started to get better, they started to make bolder, bigger text on screen, more clear thumbnails. They were still in the business niche, and so they were more niche down at this point. But then you can start to see, as they start to scale up, where their thumbnails became a lot more bold, and they went a little bit broader in some of their ideas, and for anybody could consume it instead of just business owners. And you can actually see here that they had videos with 25,000 views, 90,000, 90,000, and then they saw that this was a video that was working well in the space, made their own version of it, 572,000. So this is truly that whole strategy in practice for a channel that from this moment on has scaled tremendously to now be one of the top thought leaders in the business space, getting 2.3 million subscribers. Incredible channel, and it's just really cool to see that before and after, just to know, like, wherever you're at on your journey, maybe you're already further along in the beginning, which is really, really awesome. So I love to show that just as another practical example. And now the final strategy as it relates to growing your podcast, and that is the episode itself. You can have a great title, you can have a great thumbnail, you can have the best ones in the world, but if people click on your video and they leave shortly after, YouTube is not going to promote your video. YouTube is wanting to know and identify what are videos that people are watching, and they're watching for quite a long time. The retention is high, because if I can see that all these people over here are watching this personal finance video, well, let's push it out to all these other people that we know watch personal finance content and see if they also want to watch it, because that means they'll stay on our platform. Whereas instead, if you make a video and the video itself is not that great and people leave after 15 seconds, then YouTube's going to say, I guess people aren't interested in this. We're going to go promote the ones that are. Now, there's a lot of layers to this. So I really am speaking to it as a really foundational level in this training. I definitely making more content on going deeper on all of this, but a big disconnect is people's titles and thumbnails versus what the video is actually about, which is why in the beginning I said we start with your titles because that's your core idea. You want it to encapsulate your core idea that you're talking about. But a lot of people, especially in the podcast space, might have an episode that is on the 9 things you need to avoid with your money. And the first 3 minutes might be them catching up with their audience on where they've been the last few months. And while that can be great for your core audience that's been there, if I'm a new person that found your video and your podcast episode and I watch that, I don't know who you are. I don't care. And these are not the 9 things that I need to, avoid with my money. So I'm going to leave. And ultimately it comes down to, are you delivering on the promise and the expectation that your titles and thumbnails are creating? Now, I started us with our titles and thumbnails because I think we have to get those right first, because there's a lot of amazing videos out there. But if the packaging of the title and thumbnail are bad, no one's going to click on it. So if we can solve for people wanting to click on your episode first, then the easy part is, okay, well, let's deliver on what their expectation is. Another really easy thing in the podcast space to fix is a lot of people will spend 5 minutes doing intros about their guests and catching up on when they met each other and some small stories. And while that is great, I don't need to see your small talk. If you have an interview show, you should cut it to the first question that should be what your title and thumbnail are promising. And so it's really a simple concept of, how do I make people want to sit around and watch the thing that I convince them to click on? And a good habit to start thinking about is, when you click on an episode, when do you leave it? Is it when they go on a tangent? Is it when they start going down a story that you don't have the context for, and so it doesn't serve you? Start paying attention to when you're stopping episodes and turning them off, because that will teach you, well, okay, I need to make sure I don't do that in my show, because there's a chance that you really already are. It's a very common issue that a lot of us will run into when we're first getting started, or if nobody's ever called it out, like, how would you ever know it's a problem? And so the easiest thing that you all need to do is say, what's my core idea? And if I get people to click on it, how do I deliver on that, right? So if it's the 9 things to avoid with your money, it opens with you saying, this is my experience. I was once in debt. Now I'm a millionaire. And today I want to talk to you about the 9 things you need to avoid with your money if you want to become a millionaire by the end of 2026, right? Like, that's a hook that you could use. And then you immediately go into the first thing, the second thing, all the way through the end. But a lot of people will say, hey guys, welcome back to the show. Oh man, it's been an awesome week. I've been looking forward to this episode. I was thinking about it because I was talking to a friend. Immediately, I'm bored. I don't know what's going on. And a lot of people think that, well, that's how my favorite podcasters do it. When again, I'll go back to my original point, is most podcasts can get away with it, a Joe Rogan, is because they were in this space for a very, very long time. And they have celebrities on and they're famous in themselves. It's just different than if you were a newer show trying to get new people to pay attention to you. And really, that's the filter to think through, is that, what if this is someone's first episode consuming your show? If you start going off things that you had to have prior knowledge of about you, you're likely going to lose some people. Now, there are times when you can make episodes that it's not about going viral. It's really about just the core audience there and you're speaking directly to them. But if it's an episode that you want to do really, really well and you think it could, please do not ruin it with tangents and things that are distractions, and just stay focused. This lesson here is about the 3 different strategies to grow your show. And so I knew that, you're going to watch step 1 and then step 2 and step 3. And so I wanted to keep your attention. And so I created that to be the format of this, so that you knew, okay, we're going through step 1, which means there's still 2 more steps. And now we're on step 2, which means there's 1 more step. And now we're at this point where I've now talked through all the steps with you, and we're able to, know that we're going to wrap up here shortly. And I've been able to deliver on the expectation that you signed up for, which is really the whole goal of anything. I don't want anybody to be misled because then people get resentful, and we don't want people to regret that they watched your content, right? We want them to feel grateful and inspired and want to watch more. And we do that by delivering on the promise that you give them. Now, at a baseline from a data standpoint, just very high level, is look at how many people drop off within your first 30 seconds. You would say a baseline for YouTube, you could look in your YouTube studio, and if more than 70% of people are watching after the first 30 seconds, that's great. And you can look at the retention graphs on your episodes and understand, oh, but people, there's a huge spike at 12 minutes in. What did I start talking about at 12 minutes in? And then you say, oh, that's why I went on a tangent about, cars. I'm supposed to be talking about gardening, right? And you'd be like, okay, I understand why a lot of people left. Next time, I won't go on that tangent about cars because I'm supposed to be teaching people about gardening. Now, at a very high level, your retention graphs can tell you a lot of information as well on, are you delivering on people's expectations? And so a good baseline is say, 70% of people watching after the first 30 seconds, because if so, that means that they saw the thumbnail and the title, they clicked into it. 30 seconds in, they're like, all right, this is delivering on it. This is creating, more suspense for me to want to understand what this video is and learn from it. But then you can see 7 minutes in, 15% of people drop off. And you could say, well, what am I talking about there? And most likely you'd say, oh, that's where I went on a tangent about gardening when I'm supposed to be talking about marketing. That creates a little bit of a divide because not everyone who's a marketer is doing stuff in their garden. And so, of course, there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect there, which caused 15% of people to drop. So next time you make an episode, you will realize you should stay more focused. That is how I would read the retention data. But at the highest level for many of you, if you solve for staying on topic, which is really, but for 99% of you at a baseline, staying on topic and then looking at the data a few weeks or months, depending on how much content you're putting out after that, you will start to see, okay, I'm keeping more people here. And okay, this is where I'm losing people. So let me, see what I need to adjust there. But at the highest level, if you can nail these three strategies, titles, thumbnails, and then creating a video that delivers on the promise that you made with that title and thumbnail, your podcast is going to grow. There are other strategies that we'll be breaking down on my podcast and in my content. And if you have any follow-up questions to this, please just email me. But at a foundational level, I'm so excited to see how many of you take action on this and let me know, hey, I made these changes 3 months in, I had my first video, blow up on YouTube, or even get a couple hundred more views or a couple thousand more. Those are still wins to be celebrated. Not everything needs to be millions of views by any means, but I love to paint that picture of showing what is possible with some of the channels and stuff that we talked about today. So, and if all of this sounds great and you're going to start putting into practice, but you still need help on the strategy side and you need someone to be able to give you real-time feedback, I do consult with different podcasts and would love to hear from you and speak with you and jump on a call with you to understand kind of where your dilemmas are and how we can solve for it. So I will put a link to book a call with me if you want to make some time for that, and would love to have that conversation. But in general, as long as you take this information and you go and put it into practice and you start to see better results, I'm happy. I'm grateful for you to sign up for this and to watch through this. So again, thank you for your time and attention. I do not take it for granted. And any questions you might have, just shoot me an email, message me on LinkedIn, and I'll definitely get back to you as soon as possible.